Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited. My name's Claudia Plesa, and I work for the Association of Alaska School Boards. And we just want to welcome you. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, but I just wanted to welcome you. Thank you for being here. We're going to be talking about partnering with families. What does that look like for you? What does that look like in your role? And thinking about the programming that you do on a daily basis. That's the conversation. And we're lucky that there's lots of expertise in the room and that hopefully you all get a chance to learn from each other as well. So that's what we will be talking about today. Lisa, any other words you want to add?
Nope, but we're going to be introducing ourselves, but my understanding is who we have in the room are people who are working with families after school. So we're glad for this opportunity to talk with you. Many times we are talking with people, a family partnership with school districts and school staffs. So nice to see you guys today.
All right, so next slide. And Lisa, maybe you can just share a little bit about this slide and where we are at.
Yes, I can have land acknowledgements on another slide, but I just will go ahead and start here because this is Ha'ani, our land. Just doing a land acknowledgement. We live here in Juneau, but this photo is in Hunakau in Huna, Alaska. One of the times I was over there helping work with the school district. So just saying a quick Gunish Chish, which is thank you to the Aquan. We respectfully acknowledge the Aquan Tlingit people as original owners and inhabitants of Juneau. We invite you to think about the values in your community and think about how you could bring those forward today. Welcome. On to the next. So I am Lisa Huye Worl. That's me there in the purple on the left photo there with my family. And just thinking about our families, you know, these photos show the importance of family and community to our well-being. So just happy. You can see how I am there with my family. I am the shortest one among the bunch. Those are my two kids and my husband.
Thanks, Lisa. And I like how you always make sure to really clarify which photo is you, because I think you don't want to be confused for the one on the right. But so here I am with my two sisters, grew up in a very tight family and a big family, but we were all very close. And I feel lucky enough that I get to now work with families and tighten that relationship between school and families. My family's always been there for me when we've needed each other, even when things are hard. So, and as you can see, our value of humor really helps us through some of those. So next slide, we will set some agreements for our time together. These are really important as far as setting the space and making sure that our space is reflective of the place that we're in, the land that we are doing this work in, and the families that we represent. So these are based on the Southeast traditional values, as well as the First Alaskans Institute agreements. And so the first one is speak with care. And also the First Alaskans agreement is speak to be understood and listen to understand. And so sometimes you might think in this workshop, oh gosh, they're talking about school. Maybe I don't work in school. Maybe my program takes place in a park, but really it's about thinking like, what is it that we can take away from this time that we have together? What is it that I can share that might help others do their work better? And what can I take away so that I can learn how to do my work better? And so that is going to make our time together so much more meaningful.
Thank you. And the next we have listen well and with respect, which is very similar to FAI's valuing our time together, being present and engaged. We know in this day and age, and certainly during a pandemic, you know, we all have a lot on our plates and we have a lot on our minds. But right now, for the next hour and a half-ish, we are going to be here with you talking about how to connect with families. And so we hope that you will make best use of this time and really try to consider, you know, these thoughts, you know, because it's all about trying to connect better with our families and supporting our students in those ways.
Thanks, Lisa. Holding each other up. This is a safe space for meaningful conversation. Sometimes we have questions and we don't know where to take them. And sometimes we feel like, oh my gosh, should I even really ask this question? Or maybe I should already know this in my role. But this is a space where we're learning. We're trying to figure out what is the best way to do things. What is something that worked for someone else that maybe could work for you? And so this is a safe place to ask those questions. It's a safe place to have meaningful conversation and holding each other up, even when maybe we don't know a way forward. So that's also important to make it meaningful together today.
Thank you. Challenges to solutions. This is really about, we know and we acknowledge as we work with our students and families, as we work in after schools, in our roles, in our jobs, we all have challenges, and we acknowledge that that's real. And yet, when we talk about it and acknowledge it, we don't want to get stuck there. So thinking about, okay, we know this, as we come across and acknowledge some different challenges, we really try to work together and put our minds towards, and what can we do? That may be, and what can we do about that?
Thanks, Lisa. And our value of humor helps us. You all have worked with students and you know how important that is to create some lightness, to create connection outside of when we have rules or when we're being serious and when we are trying to get something done. So our value of humor, help us bring your whole self here, share some of the stories that maybe things didn't work out. We can all learn through that. So bring your full self here to this meeting.
Thank you. The Plinkett value, let's see, that being strong in body, mind, and spirit is very similar to FDI's agreements of taking care of yourself, take care of each other. Again, pulling in threads of that, listening well and with respect, of being present, but also, do what you need to do to be able to be engaged in a good way. Sometimes the discussion can be hard, and maybe sometimes things that others share maybe may not be something that you necessarily will resonate with you, but just try to be thoughtful and mindful and try to understand what is the intent, what is it they're actually trying to say, and maybe not get stuck on words. And if you need to, you can take a step back and then hopefully you rejoin us. All right, we'll go on to the next slide.
So we've done the welcome, the agreements, we've done introductions. Next, we're going to be doing some reflecting and thinking about the importance of family partnerships, and then also the role that we play and some of the things that we might walk into our role with without being aware of. We're going to be doing some reflecting on, how are our relationships being built with our families, who maybe it's missing. And then we also have some recommendations and some resources for you as you continue to think about your work. So that's what we'll be doing today.
So we'll get right on into the next one, the next slide with introductions. If you would, for us, give us a sense of who's in the room. I'm going to take a look at some of the pictures and slides so we can see who else is in the room. I'll certainly welcome you to turn on your camera. I know people get kind of shy, but kind of nice sometimes to know you're not talking to yourself. So we'll invite you to do that, but we'll leave that up to you. But at least in the chat, if you would please share your name and the after school program you serve in, and then in a word, use one word to describe who are our families. So Michael, thank you. And what is your after school program? So your name, your program, and then who are our families in one word. We're not looking for an essay, but just a word. Give us a sense of what you think of when you think of your families.
Hi, Kimberly.
Thank you. Thanks, Kimberly. Oh, the LEAP program here in Juneau. All right. Hello, Chris from Homer. You didn't mean to hit send yet, so thanks, Michael. You're going to be adding more. Hello, Kristen. Welcome here. Oh, but in Katsu, support. Our families are strong. Our families are support. Thank you for those words. They are diverse. Thank you. I see some AmeriCorps members here too with us. Welcome. Widespread. Resourceful, yes. Anti-mask, okay. Supportive. Yep. So all part of that different diversity, I think, thinking about them. you know, really, among other things, you'll pick up, and as you know, probably from your own experience, they are also a source of resiliency. You know, I think all families have usually some measure of love and support there, you know, as we think about that, which is that resiliency factor. Great, thank you. Love. Nice to see who's in the room. So thank you for sharing that and welcome. All right. So one of the first exercises we will do, nice to meet you. Thank you, Alma and Timothy and Misty and Paige. Good to see you all. Thanks for adding. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next exercise. Next slide. This one we, oh, wait, I'm jumping ahead. So I'm going to let Claudia share with you a bit about family partnership generally.
Thanks all. So as you all know, our kiddos, we play a big important role in their lives. And we also know that their families do too. And so our kids learn from their families. Our kids are part of so many meaningful things in their communities. And so I think being able to really tie that up and having a student be connected in all of these different ways, we have this opportunity to deepen what we're impacting. And so if you think about, oh gosh, this kiddo really grew over the soccer season in his ability to listen or wait, or to take his time when he's upset. Those are all things that can really grow for a child if the family's partnered up and working with you as well. And when I think about certain age groups, it's actually really, really hard to do the work, to do any work. I did some coaching with some kiddos. They were 5 and 6, some soccer. They were on a soccer team, on a Pee Wee soccer team. And there was lots of things we actually could not do without the families. And so when it comes to SEL skills, when it comes to helping students transition from one grade to another, when it comes to them learning some important skill that we want them to be able to do, SEL skill in our program, a lot more can happen when we have the families on board, and families are experts in their children. And so there's this great opportunity for us to deepen what we're doing. And so that's why we really, when we talk about family partnerships, we say that there's this really great opportunity there. And so next slide. And so saying all of those things about partnerships, I also want to acknowledge that we are coming in with some assumptions about you, and that might sound negative to you. Oh God, what are they thinking about me? But what we actually mean is that we know you already value relationships with the students and the young people that you serve. We know that you try hard and you spend time already cultivating these relationships, and that you probably know a lot of the best practices that might come forward. We also know that you may want to get better at deepening those relationships with families and with students. You might want to be more intentional about it. You might want to be more equitable about it. And we also assume that it would help if we have time to reflect, think about it together, and maybe had some concrete ways of thinking about it and really cueing yourself. So those are the things that we're assuming about you before going into this conversation. Oh, and you're
Let me unmute. And so, alrighty. So thank you for that. So now you know some of what we're assuming about you. And now we're going to go into our first exercise. All right. So this one is we call this a circle of trust. It's also, I've seen a very similarly, very almost identical exercise also called the trusted 10. And this one, if you would grab a pen and a paper, or maybe you'll just think mentally to yourself, but I think it'd be helpful to write it down if you're able. So with it, if you would, on your piece of paper, write down the numbers 1 through 10. So you're going to make a list. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, now that you've done that, we're going to generate your trusted 10, or your circle of trust. So I'd like you to write down some names and think about, as we think about this, think about your life day to day. Think about as things come up and you have a really great piece of, something you're excited about. Who is that person you're going to reach out to? And when you write down a name, don't write down your spouse or your significant other. So not including them. Think of your broader, think a little broader. So of that, you know, who might you reach out to if you have some great news, or conversely, maybe you get something like not great, you know, something pretty hard. In fact, you know, who are those people that you trust, that, you know, that you think of and that you spend time with, you know. I think another interesting way to think about it, since I first did this exercise a couple of years ago, is who's been in your bubble. You know, who do you spend that time, that value time? You had to keep your bubbles right small for a while. So who's in that bubble? Who's, you know, could be colleagues, could be related. But go ahead and add those names to your list. Try to come up with 10 people if you can. And this will be just for you. We're not going to ask you to share this list. This exercise is for your own reflection. I'm going to give you a minute or so to go ahead and write down some names, to think about who is in your circle of trust. And when you're done, maybe you can go ahead and either turn on your camera or maybe do a reaction to a thumbs up. I'm still going to probably just give you about a minute. I bet you the first 2 or 3 came off pretty quick. Give you a few more moments. All right, thank you. Jimena, well, A. Jimenez Brisno, thank you for that feedback. Nice to know you got to your 10, your list. Okay, thumbs ups. Well, you guys came up with a list. This is just for your reflection. Okay, thank you, Anna. Thank you, Courtney. All right, so now that we have a few, and Leah, all right, probably gave you enough time for that. So now I'd like you to take a look at your list, your circle of trust, your trusted 10, however many it is. And I'd like you to put a check mark next to the names. I'm looking at your list of those who are the same gender as you. However you identify, put a check mark. So I identify as a she, her, a woman. And so for me, any name of other people who identify as women, I would check that as well. So go ahead and put a check mark next to all the people on your list who are the same gender as you. Alrighty. That should happen pretty quick. And then I'd like you to then go take a look at your list and put a check mark next to each person on your list who is similar in age. It doesn't have to be exact, you know, but generally you consider them the same age as you. Go ahead and go down through your list, put a check mark next to each person, but generally the same age as you. All right. And now that you've done that, how about putting a check mark next to your name for everyone who on your list has a similar education level? And then how about one for professional background? You know, when we're working with teachers, we're like, if you were working with other educators, teachers, you're an administrator, maybe you put a name in for, maybe you hang out with a lot of the other after school network folks, people who work with kids after school. And I'll have you do one more. You go through your list and putting a check mark next to that. Put a check mark next to everyone on your list that is what you consider probably similar race or ethnicity. Okay. So with that, you can probably see where we're going. So if we were to draw a circle, you would have your trust circle of trust, people who are in the very close circle. Then you have a little broader, maybe people who are you're kind of connected with. Maybe you say hello across the yard to your neighbor, and then broader than that, like everybody, right? And your circle is pretty tight. And in there, think about your circle, and we'll go to the next slide. And we could have run a poll, but I'm just gonna have you do this, respond in the chat. If you feel confident, you can do that. That if you feel comfortable putting that, but just kind of kept this on the lighter side. And we're not here to judge, but just really, this is for your own personal reflection, thinking about it, taking a look at my circle of trust. I see. You maybe just put a number. My circle pretty much resembles clones of me. In your circle of trust, your trusted 10, are they pretty much people like you, same gender and education level, professional background and race? If they are, you can put 1 and just read down through the list. Maybe you have a good mix of some very similar and some who are different. And then maybe you say yours is a colorful and diverse array of older, younger, smarter, I'm kidding, ethnic and economic background. And what I will say is, I know as a person of color, mine is pretty diverse, and often I do have some non-native, not Filipino, a mix of Filipino and Tlingit. I'm often my white friend's only brown friend. So, it is what it is, and but it does tend to color like what they tend to see, like them understanding. I think a lot of them just see things differently. And so this is really for you. 5 and 5. How do we get that? Oh, like half and half, Billy. I was just trying to like think about that. Like 1, 2, 3, 5 and 5. Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Appreciate that feedback. So, what we just want to say, we won't belabor this too much, but we just wanted to share this exercise because I think in this world, and especially right now, we see so much political division. We see a lot of different things in the news. And a lot of people, we have the anti-maskers, the maskers, the vaccinated, non-vaccinators. People who maybe think differently than us, look differently than us. But what we know is that we all have a tendency for implicit bias, right? So it's one of those things. We can have a tendency to think more favorably. We have a comfort level with people who are generally like ourselves, right? We have a tendency, think of yourself when you've gone into a conference, maybe a really large room, maybe where you don't know everybody, you've gone for work, maybe it's in-service day, or you're going off to this big conference and you're supposed to mingle, and it feels different. And people have a tendency then to gravitate to people who look like them, who talk like them, who maybe, where they feel like maybe they can easily kind of connect. And in general, people not only extend greater trust, but a more positive regard and cooperation and empathy to people who we think are in our in-group or similar to us, and maybe less so for people who are outside of. And it's largely instinctive, and it's largely unconscious, but it also, it can go from us not only having a comfort level and maybe thinking more positively, people who are like us, but it also can be like, think of it in reverse. The affinity bias can also manifest like as an aversion tendency. So maybe for those groups who aren't like us, we have a tendency to not feel comfortable with them, and we may have some negative thoughts, that could be influenced by social media, from news, from whatever, especially if we don't know and have people like that, those who are like that in our inner circle that will help us. We all know, like, oh yes, we're all human, but then when it comes down to it, when we see we do have these biases, and we all have them. So the point of this is, we just wanted to talk to us, is that just know that we are influenced, often unconsciously, by implicit bias, and that we should consider about how it influences us as we work with our students and our families and our colleagues. And also think about how we can get past that. Just, I think half of it is just being aware of it. And you might want to think about this for yourself as you consider your work. Um, in the next day or two, think about that. Like, who do I talk to? Who do I share with? And who do I spend my time with? And how might that influence the way I see things? How does that influence the way I do my work? And also, does it mean that, as I'm working with students, maybe I'm withholding, getting the most praise and attention to other students who kind of look like me when I was younger. So anyway, just a little thought for taking that forward and thinking about our relationships with our students and families.
Yeah, and thanks, Lisa. And I'll add a piece here. I will say, so how does this play out? What does it look like? And I'll put myself out there. When I was working with, I was putting on a youth leadership conference. It was really, really easy for me to connect with certain students. It just happened with some students. We had something in common. It was easy for me to learn their names because we had more interactions with each other then, because they had more in common with me, or there was something that connected me to those students. And so then, as the conference coordinator, when you realize, oh gosh, I'm really good at then remembering, 30% of the students' names, 30% of the students maybe I'm not interacting with at all. And 30% maybe I'm interacting with because the program isn't working for them, or something is going wrong, or something. And so then you realize, how can I put some systematic things in place so I am able to interact with all students at all in all places? And it took me going through a year to say, I need to make sure that I'm able to look at those names and memorize their names before I ever meet the students. I had to be systematic about that. I had to be thoughtful about that, because then, instead of just letting bias play out, or just the days play out when we were at the conference, I put in a system in place so that could be minimized. And I also tried to bring in other folks, so it wasn't just me. So it really is about doing a better job for more of our kiddos, and finding out, like, what is it that maybe gets in the way. And sometimes that can be us. Sometimes the program, the way it was we put together, didn't quite work. Sometimes it never was meant to engage families. Sometimes the way we do the activities isn't quite fit for a student that comes from a particular background. So these are things that really gets us to be better at what we're doing, and to show up as a better adult to the students that we serve. So thank you, Lisa, for helping us to think about this, because we all show up with this wherever we're coming from. And so next, we wanted you all to think about, so on this next slide, and we'll just do a couple minutes here. We'll just do maybe 1.5 minutes of reflection, just so we can catch up a little bit on our time. But we want you to think about, and feel free to turn off your camera if your camera is on, who do you connect with? Which are some of those families that are just really easy to connect with? And could you even put a percentage on that? You probably know, you could probably say a quarter, or maybe half of them I connect with really well. Who's a struggle to connect with? Do you think that there's bias that could play a role? What are other things that maybe could be happening? Thinking about your communication with your families. What are ways that you've seen be effective? What works? And what else could you try? So just reflect on these questions for a couple minutes. And we know there's a lot of questions. There's just to get you thinking, and then we'll do some group conversations as well. And I'll start a timer here on my phone. Okay, thanks everyone. All right. So just I think keep some of that in mind as we go into our next piece of the conversation. And we wanted to bring forward some research pieces here. And so we know that students do better in school. And I think this also applies to any program that they're part of when they feel like the adults care about them and there's clear rules in place. And so we have a place that's safe for the student and they feel cared for. And we also know that family involvement directly correlates to students doing better. And that's SEL skills, that's attendance, that's student learning. So whatever goals you have, students tend to be better when family is involved. And then on the next slide, we know that that's true regardless of the income or educational level of the family. We know that it can be helpful if they're involved. We also know that most families know a whole lot about children's interests, what motivates them, what helps them, all of those things that can make us more effective. And we also know that as after school providers and as educators, we haven't always had a lot of training in how to partner with families. And so I just want to acknowledge that when I was doing this volunteering and I was coaching Pee Wee soccer, there was any interaction I had with families was because I thought this might help. There wasn't any support or any guidance that I received. And that's because the coordinators are so busy. And so they didn't have time to help prepare the volunteers for how to engage with families. But it really helped when I could do that. And so we also know that relationships between school staff and families determine how well a family participates in school. So all of these things are so important, and we know the research really shows that. And so going on to the next slide, this is another exercise that we like to do. And so in the chat, just for a minute or two, maybe a few seconds, what words would you what words would you use to describe this scene or household? So take a look at this household here. Go ahead and throw some answers in the chat. Busy, normal day. So true. Active, cluttered, colorful, stressful. Yes, a little stressful. Chaotic, trying to organize, chaotic, busy. Indoor weekend. Yes. Have you all been to my house or something over the weekend? So things are, when I look at this photo, and I will say this as well, when I look at this and when I've done this exercise, that's what I see. I see chaos. That's sort of what I see. But when we change our mindset, when we think about partnering with families as potentially a good thing, as something that can really help us, we start to see a lot of different strengths. And so moving over 2 slides. So if we take a look with a positive mindset, a whole lot of other things start to pop forward. And you all already saw them. You all already have this lens, right? So amongst the chaos, you saw canned salmon, you saw food, the family has food. And we also see that there's learning tools, right? There's some books and there's things on the refrigerator, the kiddos, some pictures that were drawn. We see that they're maybe playing cards. It's warm. The kids maybe spent some outside. So there's lots of positive strengths that our families are also bringing when we come in with that positive mindset. And so when we see our families as a potential partner, we can do a lot of really great work. And when we build our relationships with our families, that's the key to so many other things. And so on to the next slide, we wanted to say relationships are really the foundation of a lot of work, a lot of really big work within our schools, with working with our families. And so when we're looking at trauma engaged schools, when we're looking at school climate, culturally responsive education, relationships are at the core. And so that's why we're pushing so hard. That's why we're thinking so hard about how to strengthen those relationships and how to deepen the things that you are already doing.
Thank you. And then with the next slide, just very quickly reminding us, as we think about working with our families, we know, and especially, again, thinking of the pandemic, because, we know there's been some loss, and it's been some isolation and loss of jobs. So there may be some food insecurity, all kinds of things going on, right? So there may be some trauma, and with our families, our Alaska Native families, especially here in Alaska, there's some intergenerational trauma that we are now, the broader community is learning about that. I just wanted to share this quote. If we carry intergenerational trauma, and we do, then we also carry intergenerational wisdom. It's in our genes and in our DNA. So Kazu Haga had shared that. And with this, we just wanted to remind you that, by building relationships with our families, we can work together to build on those strengths and mitigate those challenges and trauma that some of our students and families are experiencing and have gone through. So relationships allow us to see those strengths. And so that's what we wanted to point out.
Okay, so, all right. So next we wanted you all to have some conversations together. And so we're going to take just 10 minutes so that we have a little bit of time to share out. But we wanted to know, and so that you all can have that time for sharing, how are you creating space to get to know your families, including those outside of your typical circles? So including those that maybe aren't already a close match and you already have a good relationship. And what else could you try to stretch out more and reach even more families, even more students? What does that look like for you? So we'll put those questions in the chat as well. And we will open the rooms now. We have about 10 minutes. Feel free to introduce yourselves to each other, spend some time letting each other know the work that you're doing, and then share out on these two questions. There's also going to be a group in the main room, so feel free to share. If you're not invited, stay here and you will have a group to chat with.
Okay, I know there are a few of us in the main room. So the main room is also going to be a breakout room also. So thanks, Claudia, for, oops, sorry. Thanks for putting that up on there for us and in the chat. You can stop screen share too if that's easier for you since it's in the chat. So the question was, how are you creating space to get to know your families, including those outside of your typical circle? So we can start with that. How are you creating space to get to know your families, including those outside of your circle? And if you don't want to come off mute, you can also add that to the chat. At family night events. So Monica might actually have a follow-up question for you about that. So when you are doing or hosting family night events, what are some, I guess, ways or methods that you've used in the past to maybe engage some of those families that don't typically come to family nights? Or, do you see that you have a pretty good, I guess, or you do pretty well with getting families involved with those?
So, sorry, I'll just unmute. Our after school program is at an elementary school, and so we try to include because there's a lot of families that are related to each other who might not be in program, but who want to come, with their cousins or something like that who go to the school. So we make it a school-wide event and we invite all the families, and then we try to do something that's going to be um, an extra draw for them. So for example, we did Red Ribbon Spirit Week the last week of October, and just like during the school day. And then as our family night event, we had somebody from the DEA come and somebody from the mayor's office come, and just some different people came and gave a brief little workshop, but then we incorporated a trunk or treat event into it. And part of what they were supposed to do was instead of saying trick or treat at the cars, they got to answer some sort of question related to the presentation and related to what they've been learning during Red Ribbon Week from the health teacher and all that kind of stuff. And so making the trunk or treat thing was a big draw for all of the families, something fun that they could do. But we try to incorporate something fun like that into all of them to help draw them.
Thanks, Monica. Has others done similar things, or maybe something different to help encourage families, whether it's to come to program or program events, or just different ideas on how to connect with your families? I like that trunk or treat idea. Instead of saying trick or treat, connecting it back to the lesson.
And Anna, could I add a couple of ideas?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I sort of tried to do is to try and create a small ask for families that were part of the program that I was running. And so, but I really tried to look at the asks. I think in a way, if a family feels like they've contributed something or that a strength is brought forward, they feel more positive about a program. And so I was trying to get each family to be able to contribute something. And so I created a list of different things that they could each contribute. But I really looked at that list very carefully to make sure that I included things that somebody in a hurry could get. I'll buy the snacks or I'll get the candy this time. But also somebody who can't do that. I don't have $15 to go buy snacks this time for the whole team, or $30 or whatever it is, but I can set up all the cones. And so I think really looking at the roles that you're offering and making sure that all families maybe could have something that they could contribute. And it doesn't depend on maybe resources that they already have or other things.
That's a really good point, Claudia. And that actually reminds me too, because I know sometimes thinking about program and, parents getting involved and volunteering their time. Sometimes that's tough for parents, who don't have the time, or like you said, might not have the financial means. What are some non-traditional ways of getting families involved? I'm not sure if anyone here has any experience with, just non-traditional ways that you've had parents kind of give back or get involved. Yeah, Michael, have a small budget to help with any cold weather needs. they may have. Yeah, for sure. That actually reminds me, so my son's school, he's only 3. So they have parents offered time, and one of our tasks to help the school is helping put kids in their snowsuits in the morning, or just getting their boots on. And it's just it's such a small ask, like Claudia said. But even that small ask from families, during when they drop their kids off or pick up, just helping with something like that really, just builds a classroom community too. I walked in and saw a parent helping my son get his coat on, and it was just a nice little way to connect. So I think sometimes the little things can help also. When you think about getting
that's so sweet, Anna.
I know, it was really cute.
The other thing is, and I think that's a really good point, even coming and setting up the cones, maybe that's actually a big ask for a family if they don't have the time. And so I think that's a really good point, Anna. Another thing that I have done is sometimes just ask for a quick conversation. Just say, could you just make some time where we could connect and ask some questions about their kiddo? And even that, I feel like sometimes will help families feel safer. They feel like they know who you are a little bit more. They also feel like you're listening to them, and maybe they have something that they can contribute. So some of the questions that I would sort of use is, what are some things that you think could help? And I'll just, I guess, use one of the kiddos that we work with, Henry, be able to, let's see, and I think it's trying to be positive about it too. What are some of the things that Henry, that I might do that might make practice more fun for Henry? What are things that he enjoys when he's playing? And so, lots of different things can come out there, but it does seem like you're putting some thought into it. You're trying to build a relationship. And that is something that I think families can make happen. All right, so breakout rooms have happened and they've been closed. Oh, it looks like folks are joining here in the next minute or so. So I think even saying, hey, I am relying on you to tell me what helps with your kiddo, or if there's another program where you figured out how to get them to line up. Gosh, I spent so long trying to get the kids just to line up in the program that I was running, because they're so little, because that's just where we needed to spend the time. And so that's what we ended up doing. But families are extremely helpful in telling us, like, hey, it helps to run around for about 5-10 minutes before we actually try to line up. So those were some of the things that we learned when we were working with families. So thanks all, welcome back. Hope you had some good conversations with each other. And so thinking about what you heard, what about somebody from group 1? What is something that you heard that you would want to share? Let's see, who was in room 1? And feel free to throw it in the chat as well.
So in answering the questions, how are you creating space to get to know your families, including those outside of your typical circle? So what are some of those things you heard or talked about? And also, what else can you do to stretch and reach even more of your students or families?
And feel free, others in other groups as well. It doesn't have to be group.
I forgot what group I was in.
I'm picking on you. Go ahead. Feel free to share with us.
Okay, in our group, we were just kind of talking about, I believe, Ms. Inez, she mentioned that from Campfire Anchorage, she just mentioned that they connect pretty much once a month with parents. They have an event of some kind, at least once a month, and they communicate, connect with parents that way. And I believe in another member said that they have a couple of meetings, parent family events every other month, at least 3 or 4 per calendar year. And they also mentioned the fact that they use newsletters and this other device, I want to say was, ooh, Dojo. They use Dojo, take pictures of what they're doing in their events and share it with parents because parents want to see
Mm-hmm.
what their kids are doing, and they get really excited when they see them in action. And she uses Dojo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for sharing that. So, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I could see in the chat here some suggestions too of like one of the people's teachers would kind of do a quick recap of what their son's day was like, which was a nice way to help a parent feel connected. Daily check-in along with the newsletters, communications. And one more, so that was Cheryl, and then Anna had offered, she didn't remember what group number, that's totally okay. I mentioned some family nights and inviting guest speakers to speak and providing some fun workshops as well, such as trunk or treats and non-traditional ways of having families. So that's great. And then I think I came in and back into the room when you were sharing the story of helping kids get their gear on. And thank you so much, Anna. Timothy asked, that needed more ideas and how to connect with parents because they're not a typical daycare setting. So yeah, thank you for that.
I'm not sure also our group, but this is Courtney and I was with Clarissa, Misty, Audra, and Cheryl. And we had folks, it was very interesting that we're in like non-student related positions, some more administrative. And so we were able to talk a little bit about the relationship, like providing financial resource and being able to be a point of contact to help with, if, being in the position of billing, how that might not be as rewarding with families, but there are ways still to reach out and be the touch point for your organization by having respectful and good conversation sort of in that support of student kind of area. And then we definitely kind of tackled the difficulty of if you're an intermediary and it's really the superiors that have the time. And I think Claudia mentioned in the beginning of if you're not the person that really gets to see the families, how do you pass on information to strengthen a connection if really you have a smaller role, maybe just with a group of kids once in a while. So we sort of shared that, and then how to go about engaging non-traditional families if students are homeless or in transition, and how just keeping up positive communications with, even if it's that student or whomever you can, just kind of continuing to garner that trust relationship so that when they need you, they know that you're there, however that transition works.
Amazing. Beautiful. Thank you. Those are great examples. And, I think about that two sayings I thought about a lot as a parent who did a lot of family engagement and support, but then also found myself in positions where I was trying to get others to encourage other families to participate. But, I often thought about, people it was nice. I had some different resources, certainly, and I intentionally so, because it was very challenging. I grew up with a single mother with 4 daughters, she had a high school education, experienced a lot of trauma, didn't feel safe in the schools, but I think even so, all of our families care and they want their kids to succeed. And she did support us, in ways she knew how. But I think about how it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I had a great village that I had cultivated for my kids. And I also think about myself and what made a difference for me, growing up with, a fair amount of challenges growing up, but how one caring adult can make such a difference. And so I often thought about how can I be that caring adult, and how can I encourage and help others to be that for other kids. So what you're talking about is that a bit. I really appreciate Erin, your comment about being going into community events and being where the kids are. Sometimes I think teachers, especially, I don't know that I saw that very often with my teachers, but we have many cultural different types of big events in Juneau, like celebration, and I encourage my kids' teachers to come you know, to see us in places where we were comfortable and places where our culture shined, we, you know, that meant a lot to us. And so doing those kind of things out in the community to connect with your students and families could be a great thing. Okay, there are a couple more things. Oh, sure, go ahead. But there are a couple more things we wanted to share with you before we go into our Q&A session. But go, sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut off.
No, I just want to ask, I know you asked 2 questions, and what was the second question?
I think it was about just, you know, making space, you know, how can you connect with others that, yeah, to stretch and grow to reach more families.
All right, thank you.
It was around communication.
Yeah.
Thanks also. We're going to quickly move on so we can answer some of your questions, which I see some questions there already. Thanks all for all of your good suggestions. So looking onto the next slide, one thing we wanted to say that I think is really, really important is that parenting can be a challenge, and that we do have high levels of trauma for some families. And so while most families that are maybe in this kind of position are healthy families, but they are experiencing a particularly stressful challenge. And so good parenting skills, or sometimes our best practices, don't always work, but we know that students can be engaged, and we know that relationships and care and support can get past some of this. But parenting can be a challenge sometimes. And so really honoring that some families are going through some things that not others are. So how do you create some additional supports? And it may not be you that gets to support that family, but once you notice that some of these things are in place, really trying to find the support, because these might be really, really stressful times for folks. So we just want to acknowledge that sometimes family experience that. So our recommendations going forward, and that's our next slide there.
Well, and with that, I will say for those kids who are going through challenge, you know, the families, if they've experienced a fair amount of trauma, intergenerational trauma, and haven't have the opportunities and resources to really deal with that trauma, they may or may not have the healthy regulation skills, you know, and so their children may not be learning it. And so, and the kids, when they're experiencing it, may be acting out. So just maybe reminding yourself that sometimes when kids are acting out, they may be dealing with stress, and they may not have learned, you know, some really good coping mechanisms of like healthy ways to express that frustration.
And it's a sign that they might need some support. So our recommendations: continue to grow, to get to know your families and your students in the community that you're at. Continue to work towards that. Build relationships to do so. You might not be I might not feel like I'm at home in this community, or I might not feel like I'm from here, and yet those relationships are what might get you there. Get to know which families might need some additional support. Create a safe space for families. That's so huge for families to be able to share why something is working, why something might not be working. Link families to other resources when possible. Make sure your activities, your lessons, your content are appropriate for those, for the context that you're in, and families can help check that. Families can tell you that if you have a good relationships. And think about how you're doing. Always evaluate. Am I doing this well? Who am I reaching? Who am I not? So that we can continue to grow and learn as a community. The other thing I'll say is we have a lot of different resources available that you can use, and we'll put the slide in there so that you could take a look at the resources. But there's lots of resources that can help your growth, and that can help what it is that you're hoping to accomplish and deepen. So we'll stop here for some Q&A.
Yeah, well, this framework that is shown here, it has these different building blocks for building good family partnership. I dropped the link, a link to a digital copy of that framework for you.
Thanks, Lisa. All right, so thanks all. There's lots of good combos. Take it away, Courtney.
Thank you. Well, I just would like, first of all, to thank you both so much. It's clear your passion and your expertise in this field, just really clear. And there's so many lessons to walk away with and resources to carry forward. So I want to thank you both. And if everyone will please join me in thanking Claudia and Lisa for bringing all of this great knowledge to us from their work with the Association of Alaska School Boards. Please do check out those resources. I wanted to remind everyone as well that we learn and grow from evaluation. And so if you would check out the link on our schedule, and Anna and Thomas have sent those out multiple times, but please do give feedback. especially with a session this great, it's really nice to know how the resources will be used as well. And you can see that the contact information for Claudia and Lisa is here. If you could either post your question in the chat, or if you want to just take yourself off mute and ask on your microphone directly, please just be mindful that there might be multiple questions and others might be waiting in queue. So thank you again, and I will turn off the mic and turn it over to questions.
I have a question. Courtney, this is for you. So all I can find on the main screen for the conference is the full conference evaluation, the survey. I can't find the ones for individual workshops.
So as Lisa and Claudia answer questions, I'm going to pop in, I think, the evaluation, when you click the full conference evaluation, I think it will ask you, like, one of the first prompts will be, what session are you in? Which session did you attend? And we can pick strengthening families, stronger together, and then fill out from there. And oh, and Deanna, of course, it looks like the link was just posted to the chat. And if it does look like the overall, again, go ahead and pop into it and pull the session out. Thank you.
Any questions, thoughts? I guess, that's one thing I wonder, like, what are your thoughts, now that we've gone through this? But yeah, working with kids and families.
And Cody, I was wondering if you're still on. It looked like you had a question there. I just want to make sure I'm capturing it.
Billy, it was nice to see you briefly there too. Thank you for turning on your camera. I'm like, oh, okay. That's what Billy looks like.
So Cody, it sounded like, so earlier in your question there, oh, go ahead. Oh, okay, sorry, I thought you had a question. Careful raising your hand in this room here. So Cody, it sounded like you are wondering, how do I connect? You work in a Russian village as a non-religious, non-Russian, feeling some struggle to connect with parents and students there. So one thing I will say is that sometimes that connection comes easier for us when we have a lot in common with some of our students or with the families there. And that's why sometimes we might even say, hey, it looks like Cody's really good with this group of students. I'm actually going to tag on to what Cody's doing because he has a good connection. But what do we do there when we don't have that automatic connection with the families that we're serving or with the students that we're serving? And I think what the point, and it's really tempting to say, maybe I'll just, I'll learn to fish or I'll learn to do the thing, but really what it is, when I think about my immigrant family and why my mom might have wanted to build a relationship with the adults that were running things at the school, it was so that she knew that I was safe. So that she knew that the adults there were good people that were going to look out for me. She wasn't checking to make sure that they thought the same thing as her, that they were also Romanian, or that they, and so I think if you're able to build relationships, Cody, in a way that are authentic and they know who you are and they understand that you also have good intent and a good heart for what you're doing and the support that you're bringing to their families, I think that's what the relationship will do. And you don't have to be anybody else but yourself, but you have to be in a close relationship with those folks there so that they know that oh, yes, this is Cody. I know Cody. That's the Cody.
Anna had a suggestion of, like, she finds that sometimes she said, can you tell me more about open conversations and learning and building? And I would say that's true. I think it's that having that natural curiosity about others. Like, people know, it's like, well, it's very clear very quickly, like, not Russian, not knowing this stuff, and that's okay. And you can use it as an opportunity to learn. I will say, though, as a Flanket and a Filipino, I appreciate some of that genuine curiosity. Just make sure you don't broach it and go into this place where you feel like it's in like an interrogation or like you're being interviewed. Like, a couple of questions as beginnings, and then you should let a natural conversation flow. But I've been with people who are like way too intense about it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, get me out of here, because I'm like, maybe you should do some of your own homework too. Like I just felt like it was like a little bit too much.
Mhm.
Anyway.
And I think the other thing that I'll say is just realize that once you get to know a family, that might be one family and that's their way of doing things. And the more that you know, so stay open, keep staying open, keep being open to relationships and to learning. Sometimes my best relationships, students that I've gotten really close with that I worked with in a program came a few years later, a couple of years into me knowing them very well. They said, you know what, that thing that you guys do, that doesn't really work. And so it took some time for them to get to know me and really know me before they could say, I actually feel like I can share this with Claudia. But it took some time. So really let those relationships be real and develop, and know that you have to continue to be open. And there's lots and lots of good stuff in the chat too. So thanks all for continuing to share. Other questions that you have or that you're wondering about?
So that digital resource, that family is stronger together. We didn't get to talk about it, but there are like 6 different building blocks, and it's really geared towards educators, because we feel like they need to do the most work on family partnership, like not putting the onus on families. But here's an actual like printed copy of the book, but what I shared was the digital version. So feel free to take a look at that as a resource. There's different building blocks there and ideas. You have some really great ones here. You had some in your discussion. But you can also take a look at that resource we shared with you. And I shared the digital copy of that.
And I think it'll give you some things to think about. You might say, oh gosh, that looks like this part's for schools, but there's still some piece that might feel relevant to you. Thinking about, for example, like what skills are you really hoping to accomplish with the students? I didn't think at my Pee Wee soccer team, one of the biggest celebrations we had is at the end of the season, we could all line up very quickly and very efficiently. And so that was a skill. I didn't know that was a skill that we wanted to accomplish together, right? But it gets me to think about, okay, so there's actually some SEO skill that I'm building here with the kids. How do I help them do that? And so I think looking at some of those building blocks can help you to think about your program and help you to reflect on things.